Hold- We've got to make the thumbnail for him for that. Here's
Oh
here's
yeah.
everything you can do with 6 inches.
He does play Emperor's Children.
Hello and welcome back to the Red Path. It is Jamie and it is Dara, and we are here on a day of days, or the day after a day of days, I guess, depending on when we drop this video. We've obviously just received our brand new, beautiful, sparkling, blood-covered Codex, and hopefully you saw whatever we released yesterday, and our initial thoughts. But we're now going to start diving a little deeper into things and really kind of getting into the nuts and bolts, right, Dara?
Oh yeah, yeah. It's this is going to be a fun one. I think this will hopefully serve to salve the wounds of many people who are kind of feeling a little bit burnt about the Codex. And we've got an awful lot coming up, as you might have already heard. Like we've got content out of every different direction for the next couple of weeks. It's
Thought
going to
you
be
were going
pretty
to say
wild.
orifice there.
it's it slipped into my mind, but I said I'd keep it PG for now at least.
Fair enough, fair enough.
But then you went and ruined it, so here we are. But yeah, I think it's like obviously it's an incredibly exciting time for World Leader players. Maybe an incredibly frustrating time for some people as well. Which, to be honest, I can understand the
Yeah.
frustration. It's a huge amount of change. I think an unprecedented level of change compared to maybe what we had been expecting. And like, so obviously myself and Jamie, we've been playing World Leader since eighth edition, and
Yeah,
this
pretty much.
is without doubt the most amount of new rules that we have received in a single sitting, like since we began playing
Yeah.
World Leaders. So it's a lot to digest, and it's a lot to get
We
our heads around.
our brains aren't coded to handle a codex. I mean, let's
Yep.
be honest, like, okay, all right, we had the eighth edition codex, but we only focused on one sub faction, right? Then we got our ninth edition, or played most of ninth edition with the same rules. Then we got the codex at the end, which was two detachments. Played 10th edition mostly with one detachment until Christmas time. Now we have essentially six. Admittedly, vessels hasn't changed much. Index hasn't changed, or sorry, Berserker Warband hasn't changed much. It changed a bit, but then there's four new rule sets that are just completely brand new. It is tripled what we have to think about and learn and know, and it is a lot to go through. It's a lot to manage in our smooth brains. But I think we're going to try, and we kind of want to focus today, Darren, like you mentioned on our sort of like history, playing through eighth edition, ninth edition, um, and going through that journey. And we kind of want to. One of our goals here is to just calm it down a bit. For there's been a lot of people. Oh, Angron's dead. Oh, Berserkers are only strength four. You know, and yes, these potentially are things that are true. Like Angron, isn't anywhere as good as he was. But we can't write him off. Berserkers at strength four base, not necessarily. Well, they're objectively not as good, but we've got to see how they fit into the larger puzzle, and using this kind of experience. And there's a lot of folks in our Discord who've been with us since eighth edition, ninth edition. We all remember the one wound days, right?
Oh.
And yeah, Chaos Space Marines and World Eaters have historically kind of been at the back of the line in getting cool new stuff, and we've dealt with it before. We'll deal with it again. And I will say, I don't think this is in any way a nerf to our army. Not in yes, some things have come down in power, other things have shot up in power, and there's just a billion new things that we have to think about. And we want to put a bit of a sunnier disposition on this, don't we?
Absolutely. Yeah, I think like the core takeaway here is basically we're going to be kind of going through how the meta of the army, like the fundamental playstyle, has just completely shifted from what we knew in 10th edition and in the late days of ninth edition, being the like hyper
Leroy
fast.
Jenkins.
Yeah, exactly. Just run forward and blend. That's gone now. And we have to sort of get into a bit of a frame shift about the new way that we're playing World Eaters. And I say new in a kind of funny sense of the word because it's going to be
Yeah.
new for people who have joined us in 10th edition.
The
But
majority of World Eaters players.
exactly, right? Yeah, most people are going to be like, how the hell do I play this? This doesn't feel like World Eaters. But for the likes of me and Jamie, which is kind of the reason why we decided the two of us would make this video instead of having Brian here as well, is because this is very, very familiar to how we used to play
Mm.
World Eaters. And, you know, people might say, oh, World Eaters were bad back then. And that's not really true. World Eaters were crazy powerful back in the day.
What do you mean you get to fight twice?
Yeah, right?
Like, you remember that? And the first time someone asked you that at the table was like, yeah,
Yeah.
not twice. I'm going to spend some CP and fight a third time, you know?
So
We don't
it's a
get
bit of
that.
a retro vibe for me and Jamie. And it's like when we look at it, we can see that power because we can see like the army wants to play as it used to, but it's a lot more powerful with the tools that it now has. And the jank is kind of coming back. And basically, we want to kind of go through that and get people's heads around the idea that, yes, the army is absolutely changing, but no, the army is not nerfed. The army is not really bad on the tabletop. In fact, I would say with time, we'll probably find that the army starts winning more tournaments than it did before, that
I think
people
so.
start placing higher. And I'm gonna rip the band-aid straight off, and I'm gonna say it's a good thing that we lost advance in charge because now people won't start running into screens in turn one and getting absolutely tabled by their opponents. I think people are gonna learn how to play combat better, basically, which is a good thing.
I know for the majority of 10th edition, yourself, whoever we've been talking to, whether it's Brian, whether it's been Ryan and Jack, who all the people that kind of like we in our kind of circle, pick members of the Discord, always looking at that at the win rates. Like typically, and you'll have to correct me here, but typically our 43 to 50 odd percent win rate over 2 years hasn't been a true representation because it's been a band of people at the top 4-1ing, 5-0 pretty consistently, and a band of other people nearer the bottom, 1-4, 2-3, whatever, which there's nothing wrong with that. But it's been an average, a mean average of two diametrically opposed result sets rather than a bell curve where the majority of players were at that kind of 3-2 pushing 4-1 range, right? Is that an accurate
Yep, that is very
statement?
accurate. Yeah, if you watch any of the meta reports that I put out from previous times in 10th edition, it's actually like a where you would expect it to be a normal distribution, so the curve kind of goes into a bell shape. It's actually like binormal, where it's like an inversion of that. So you've got like the two peaks here, and then they kind of curve in the middle. So whereas you're seeing like the average win rate be anywhere between 40 and 50% is very typical for world leaders. But there's almost no world leader player who, if they look at their tabletop battles app, is going to see 40 to 50%. They're going to
Oh,
probably see something on the lower end or something on the much higher end.
yeah,
And that is because the majority of players were falling into that kind of what I was calling like the low elo bracket, which is where they were ranking on stat check, versus the high elo bracket. And like you said, it's a mix of like 1405 results versus like 5041 results, which is like it makes it very difficult to have a conversation sometimes because you've got these two very, very different player populations which are having completely different experiences on the
yeah.
tabletop. And that is purely down to the army in the index pushing you in a certain way, which was go fast, go hard.
Now, advance and charge, turn one
Exactly.
charge, which
Yeah.
was solved in about 5 minutes of the index being released. And it would win you a game here and there, and there was always opportunities. There were certain matchups and missions where that was always going to be a winning strategy, but you can't do it for 5 games at a GT and win.
Yeah.
Okay, there'll be someone who's the exception to that rule who pulled it off, but the average player cannot live that experience. And whilst it's a very adrenaline fueled way of playing the game. It's not like how, and I've mentioned this in Discord. I think I hate to make it like a no true Scotsman statement, but it's not how World Eaters used to play, and it's not how certainly I feel they should play to sort of be compliant with their rules history and their lore. Like, because we ultimately want our armies. Most players want their armies to mirror what their army does in the books and in the canon and stuff, right?
Yeah, they want
And
that power
yes,
fantasy.
yeah, we want our worldies absolutely to dominate in combat. And yes, they do just run straight for the fight in the lore and stuff. I get that, but there's only so much you can give your genetically enhanced super soldier that's always angry and halfway possessed by a god of war and stay fair, like, and
Yeah, I
stay
mean,
balanced.
when you've
Like,
got like your average berserker being 3 times as fast as an Eldar, I'm kind of like,
yeah,
you know?
yeah. There's so balancing that all out, and that kind of loops back in the way eighth edition, ninth edition World Eaters played, did that very well. It was often limited by the wider meta just getting advantages, ludicrous advantages, quite frankly, a lot of the times. But the fight twice, the second pile in, the 6 inch consolidate we could do, the fight a third time, all these little things which, like I mentioned earlier, it's like, come on, Darren, like you remember that time where you pulled off that perfect, con or berserker squad. Just like they kill a unit, they consolidate, they kill a second unit, you spend the CP, they kill a third unit, and you're like, oh yeah, I just won the game. And it's like, it for me, it often happened accidentally. But
Yeah,
if you
yeah.
can do that, if you can do that intentionally, if your ability to like look at the board state and kind of do that kind of chess maneuvering in your head, and you pull that shit off, now admittedly, 6 inch pile and 6 inch consolidate, which I think is one of the fundamentally biggest advantages and game state changes for our new army or our new codex. That isn't fight twice, except on one unit that is, I hope, out of Dara's closet now. Uh, because I'm very excited to see something very good happen with the Hellbrute.
Yep.
But aside from that, the way that the army plays is much closer to how it used to play, and it's mind fucking your opponent.
Yeah,
You create problems. It's like, here you go. You know I can do this now. Here's my guys that will rip apart most of your units. What are you going to do about it? Who's going to blink first here?
exactly. Yeah. I think it's really moving away from the sort of alpha strike potential. It's moving away from the extremely high pressure. And that's not to say that we're not a pressure army because we absolutely still are, but it's moving away from like the pressure being where is your deployment zone? You'd better move 12 inches away from that. This is more like a mid-board controller army. This is more like the passive aggressive playstyle, which some people will know I'm a big fan of anyway. Um, you still have the pressure because you're still faster than the average Marine. You still hit really hard in combat, and you've got a ton of tricks that can be exploited in really interesting ways. So you still have the pressure, you still have the threat range. A lot of our units still move incredibly fast. It's just not quite, oh yeah, I can move my Exalted Ape 23 inches in turn one and still charge
Right.
you, right? Which, like, frankly, was a little bit ridiculous. Like, yeah, we all love that power. And don't get me wrong, I sympathize with anyone who is upset about losing that speed. Yes, it is upsetting, especially if you have to learn a completely new way of playing the game. Ultimately, I think the play experience for your opponents a lot of the time, especially if they did make that mistake in deployment and got absolutely hammered by a turn one rush, it doesn't feel great. And I think that
No.
this codex is better structured for a fairer play experience for both players, regardless of their skill level, which is quite important because not only does weaker opponents have a better time against you, but weaker World Eater players will actually have a better time against
Yeah.
stronger opponents now because they won't feel incentivized to bum rush in turn one and fall victim to good screening. Instead, now they know that they're limited by where they can go, so they're going to be a lot more likely to set up and stage, to execute a proper push correctly, and by extent become better players because
Mhm.
they will start to learn like, oh, actually, this whole staging thing is actually really quite powerful. Why did I ever advance and charge in turn one and rush? You know, so I think it's actually like once we kind of get over that frame shift, once we get this new set of rules into our head, I think a lot of people will actually start to realize that there's a ton of power in it and will find themselves improving at the game. So it's a net positive for me in a lot of ways. And the jank is back in a big way. And we are going to be breaking that down in our detachment reviews in great detail. So look forward to that. But I think broadly speaking, we might talk a little bit about like combat armies in general, what makes them good, and where the index was and where the codex now is. So you want to kind of lead us into that one, Jamie? Hey
Yeah,
everyone, if you've been enjoying the Red Path and want to support the channel, then check out our Patreon. Whether you're into competitive play or just love hobbying your berserkers, there's something in there for you. By signing up to either the Berserker Hobby or Berserker Competitive tier, you'll get access to one of two private channels in the Discord, which focuses on painting and modeling or competitive play. You'll be able to talk shop, jam list ideas, paint jobs, and all that good stuff in there. And if you just can't decide between the two, then grab the 8-bound tier, which gives you access to both. The links are in the description below. Cheers for watching, folks, and keep walking the red path.
yeah, I'd want to quickly just comment on something you said. It does feel like GW sometimes watches the red path and just takes things that we say and go, you know what? They're not idiots. Like because just pulling back the advance and charge, alpha strike, straight up the line kind of mentality, which we've often discussed as like not being super fun or good for the game. And again, they knew that they didn't need to hear us say it, but we've always had this kind of. Certainly, you and I have had this. The pressure cooker, the assault over several, 2 or 3 waves, and like really kind of just keep jabbing,
What
jabbing,
was it?
jabbing.
Your iconic series? I think it was before I was on the channel. It was like the 3 steps of the axe or something like that. Yeah,
The
right?
like the raised axe, the
Yeah.
swing of the axe, and then the bite of the axe. Yeah, exactly. And just looking at rules like the Forge Fiend, re-rolling hits against the closest model, right? And with rapid fire at half range. You want your opponent in the middle of the table for that ability to kick off. You want your opponent in the middle of the table to mitigate charge distances for your units, which are going to go in and start racking up the win cons for you. Rapid fire being abundant now just means we want to get close, but we're lethal. We because I do feel like most armies are going to want some firepower, like
Yeah.
Forge, maybe the Lord of Skulls. I really like the Lord of Skulls
Our firepower is very
more.
good now. And
Yes.
like going back to 8th and ninth edition,
Yeah.
we pretty much always had like 2 firepower units to support our pushes. So I'm kind of
Yeah.
like, you know what? I'm feeling this change.
Yeah. It's the transport crackers. It's the just whittling off a few wounds because you're going into custodes with AP1 or something. Yeah, whatever you need to do. The army, sorry, the codex is consolidated around a kind of core concept of we can dominate the middle of the table.
Hmm.
Like that's going to be our home now. And so now going into the kind of point of say index versus codex, right? Index was very much advance and charge. Yes, we could play the Jack Pack, we could play Nongron, we could play Triple Lord of Skulls, we could play lots of different alternatives. But ultimately, the RB2K kind of Angron build was generally the archetype, which was I don't want to say strongest because that's not fair because these other builds were good, but it was the classic way to play, I guess. You
It
got
was
Angron, you got your
adaptable.
eight down.
Yeah, it was adaptable.
Oh,
It was
first Maori,
powerful. It had it all. Yeah.
yeah. Um, and we're not that anymore. There's going to be lists similar to that. I don't think we're going to see to start with too many Angron heavy lists. I think we are a wider army now. Um, would like points to settle. There's some things which we need to see how that shakes up. Like what are we about a month away from a
About a
new
month away from
update?
the next big slate.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So
That will
depending
be a
on
big tell.
yeah. Um, but our fundamental game plan, I believe, has changed for the better. The index speed racer, it's gone. We're going to play wider. We're going to play jankier. We're going to play around. A well played World Eaters list is now going to play around your opponent. You don't just have to run straight up and punch him in the face. We've got options. Our blood surge is now much more potent.
Oh, it's
Oh
so
my,
good. It's so good.
it's ludicrous in certain situations. Like you are just putting massive problems on your opponent.
That's what I'm talking about. That's the
Yeah,
pressure, you know?
yeah,
It's the jank pressure where it's like, "Oh, I think I'm okay." Actually, bro, you're not.
yeah, right. Because, yeah, we just auto eight. So yeah, your 7.1 safety is now 9.1 safety, which is just putting you back. And we still move 8 inches. We don't need to advance. So and importantly, for a lot of weapon and like firepower our opponents use, which would typically be used to murder berserkers, their rapid fire range is probably 12, 9, or 6. So you've got to kill everybody. Like, so a lot of the more subtle problems we used to present are now magnified. And some of the more egregious problems we presented, like advance and charge, are absolutely reduced. Yes, I just think we are definitely back to the jank. We do need to think a lot more now. That is the problem. We are going back to being, ironically, a thinking person's army.
Quite a cerebral army, yeah.
Yes, like you to win, you have to. If you want to
Yeah.
win a GT, if you want to 4-1 a GT, you're gonna have to know your core rules. You have to be undisputably knowledgeable on your charge, pile in, consolidate, all the micro tiny rules.
But that
You've
was
got
the
to be
case with
able
the
to.
index, right?
Yes,
You know,
it
it was
was.
yeah.
It was. But I think now, especially with the 6 inch, right?
It opens up a ton of doors.
That's yes, that's such a big projection. And the very fact we're going to see Hell Brutes, man. I know that it's like such a small part.
There's going to be a story.
There's going to be a lot of stories. I
Yeah.
think they're a unit that is depending on how like list progression works, and there's not going to be the list for World Eaters. There's going to be several very strong lists, but I just think having that key unit that is just so destabilizing. A good opponent has to now spend their movement phase making sure everything is, like 13 inches
7.1
apart,
inches
or
away
yeah,
from each other.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. You don't want to get piled into.
Yeah.
But oh yeah, there's so much. There's so much. But it's a fundamental paradigm shift away from the index. We're no longer index world eaters. That's gone. It's done with. Don't try and recreate that wheel. Build something brand new. I
Yeah.
mean, how are your thoughts on that?
No,
But
I think that's actually a fantastic closer to your thoughts there because you really you can carry over a certain amount of index knowledge and index skills. You absolutely can. But you do have to like go in me and Jamie's case, you got to go back to the roots, to what you knew before, and kind of, brush the cobwebs off those skills,
yeah,
like your movement in the charge phase manipulation. And don't worry, Brian's already going to be on the case, giving us a
yeah.
full workshop on the things you can do with 6 inch pylons and consolidates. And that's coming down the road. So get ready for that one. But you
Oh, hold
do.
on, hold on, hold on. We've got to make the thumbnail for him for that. Here's
Oh
here's
yeah.
everything you can do with 6 inches.
He does play Emperor's Children. So obviously you have to like really dial in on your manipulation of the combat phase, and it certainly helps that we have become more lethal, to sort of get over that hurdle of kind of like, oh, that combat didn't go my way. I can't manipulate my movement as I wanted it. That's gonna be that's gonna be a tough one for people. if you were the kind of player who played extremely hyper aggressively, then you have to rein that in. You have to get used to playing passively and setting up your staging correctly, which is hard to do initially, but we have a great video on that, so why not check out the passive aggressive playstyle? It's like one of our most popular videos ever.
Yeah, right.
But I think the way that it is for me, and this is kind of how I always think about it, is like there's like a Venn diagram of three circles, and in one you've got combat output, in the other you've got speed, and in the third one you have durability. And if you look at index world leaders, you have a ton of speed. You're literally probably one of the fastest infantry armies in the game, without question. So your speed is on like 11 out of 10. Your combat output is very, very good, but it's not like top of the game. Your combat output's probably on like a 7.5 or an 8. And then your durability, because of the feel no pain and the inbuilt feel no pains, is pretty good. You're probably sitting at about a 5 or a 6.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah? Fair?
Yeah, I'd say on the 6 side,
Yeah,
but about six
probably.
and a half
Yeah.
even.
In
But
in
yeah, no,
vessels in vessels it's probably
yes.
on a 6.5. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, sure, yeah.
So then you look at the codex, and the way that it worked for me, the way that I broke this down and kind of worked out, okay, what does the army want to do now is like, how does that Venn diagram change? How do those levels alter? And that will tell me, number one, is the combat army viable? Because I've always said a combat army needs two of these things
Mhm.
to be good. It doesn't need all three, but it needs two. And number two, like, given all these new values, what does the army want to do on the tabletop? So I would say our speed has been brought in from an 11, maybe down to a 7 out of 10, because you're still a
Yeah,
very fast Marine army.
just make
And
it an 8. Just make it 8, 8,
you
8
can
out.
say 8 because you've got so much movement in the charge phase, and that brings it up to an 8. And I think it's fair to put it at the 8 because you've still got your 8 bound move 10. You've got your Juglords potentially making Zerks move 10. You've got your D6 plus 2 Surge, 6-inch pylon to consolidate, and a ton of movement jank across the board. Like, the movement is there. The durability is basically gone. Outside of a couple of detachments, you don't really have durability anymore. So the durability is like way down to like a 2 or a 3 because you're still Marines, and in some detachments, it's still sort of there. Then you look at the combat output, and this one is the one that probably now cranks up to a 10 or an 11 because this is the thing that's maybe not the most obvious to players because they say, oh, well, Dara, like a lot of our data sheets kind of stay the same. Berserkers are down to strength 4. How can our combat output get better? And it's not really that obvious because it really kind of comes down to the blessing. So obviously we have a new blessing for dev wounds versus infantry, which is a combat based blessing. It boosts your power into infantry, which is great. But because we lose plus 2 move, well, lose is a strong word. Plus 2 move moves
We
into our
just
data
gained
sheets.
it. We just
Yeah,
don't
we
even have to get it
yeah.
anymore. It's
So
just
that
there.
that blessing's gone. You're never using that. The Feel No Pain's blessing is gone, and the Advance in Church blessing is gone. So when you roll your blessing dice, what are you putting down? You're putting down combat output buffs. And like I think I said this in the Discord a couple of weeks ago. I basically said I bet most World Eater players can count on one hand the amount of times they've had lethal and sustained active at the same time.
Yep.
And that is going to be so common now. And not only that, you look at vessels where you could have lethal sustained dev up at the same time. You look at Berserker Warband where you can flip that extra blessing on as well. The the combat output is incredible now. You look at 8 bands, making your boys hit on 2s when they're next to or going into infantry. You look at things like the Lord of Skulls getting more attacks. You look at the 2 variants of 8 band, while outwardly maybe seem worse than they were before, are highly specialized now and good at killing the things that they want to kill. Our combat output is so high right now. Super, super high. I think there's no question about that. So when you look at it, you're like, okay, we're still a faster than average army with
Yep.
insane combat output and not much durability. That screams passive aggressive to me because I'm fast enough to get to my staging, but not fast enough to breach that staging and get to the enemy lines very quickly. I've got really good combat output, but I'm kind of a glass cannon.
Yeah.
So I need to get to my spots. I need to set up my army. I need to push them and push correctly and need to finish the game by playing around that. Now, that is a super basic explanation for what the overall army wants to do, and each detachment will want to do it differently or kind of frame shift into different aspects of that. But I think broadly speaking, that's the shift from index to codex. And I don't know, Jamie, do you think that's like accurate? Was there anything you touch on there?
No, I agree with everything there. The part I want to touch on though is what you said near the end about all the detachments. Um, Everyone plays this game differently. Dara and I, Brian, Ryan, Jack, loads of folks in our Discord. If you're watching this, there's no way you play the game the same as me or anyone else. We all have slightly different skill levels, slightly different experience levels. Some of us run some models because that we just love Khorne, or we just love whatever, or this particular Dishonored has shown his worth and
Don't talk muck about
deserves.
Barney, man. Don't you bring him into this.
but
I'll never forgive them for what they did to Barney's stat line.
yeah, but the detachments we now have really opens up the way for expression, not just a skill expression, which will be the end game of this. But for like, I know. Oh man, I really went out of focus there. Like games in the Discord really wanted a kind of demon engine vehicle heavy. I can't remember the warband in the lore.
Brazen Beasts?
Brazen Beast, yeah,
Yeah,
really
yeah,
wanted to pursue. Well, guess what? You can do that now.
yeah.
If some players really want to have the Khorne Demonkin, like the folks that like played the shit out of it in seventh edition, it's back.
I mean, you got to talk about Josie, right? And the Jack Pack.
And the Jack Pack, yes. If you're the sort
Yeah.
of I can't get inside of someone's brain who can handle 100 plus 28 mil bases and moving them and winning events with that. Like my back is just aching at the thought of it. Oh, you're someone like me who is diametrically opposed to that and builds lists based on having a small model because they like not being crippled for the next couple of days after a GT. But whatever, we're not locked into this advance and charge mentality. You can find what you want to run and you can find a home for it in one of these detachments.
Mm.
And from that you get the reps in, you play in against the meta armies. You'll slowly build a way to find how it works for you, and that's how you're going to learn your combat mechanic tricks and jank by enjoying the game. And
Yeah.
something there's been 10th edition has been a very good edition overall. I think it's had, of all the metas I remember, the most balanced meta for the most part. There's been a few shaky moments there, but the core rules are very solid. They're watertight for the most part. Yes, the occasional abuse gets found, and but it gets fixed. Um, Points are generally, with some exceptions like the Mo, like they make sense. There's common sense behind them. Um, the core game is solid. It's maybe lacked in a bit of not variation isn't the word. Individuality, I think,
Yeah.
was lost from the carryover from 9th to 10th. But now, at least for us, we've got 6 ways to express that. And within each of those 6 ways, a million ways to build and optimize for our own personal enjoyment, wants, needs, and things like that. So I think our overall faction's enjoyment rate is massively going to increase just because we can now start to do the things we want to do. Like War Boss, I don't know where 30 Terminators ends up, but I think there's a place for it, or whatever are kind of like things that we support and are behind. I
Yeah,
think
but I mean,
for everything,
I think
right?
like the peak example of this is obviously when myself, Jamie, and Brian saw all the rules, for the first time. Obviously, we're all talking to each other, super super excited. There was like two key takeaways for me. Number one, the three of us were like, "Wow, this is really good. This is really powerful rules, really interesting, wonderful frame shift for the army." The second takeaway was that all three of us immediately moved in a different direction to a completely different detachment. Just being
Yeah,
like, that's what I want to do, you know?
yeah,
I think it was like it was gore tread for you, right, Jamie? You were just like, yep, that's my vibe. Brian was like humming and hawing between Core Demonkin and Berserker Warband. And I just went straight to the 8 band detachment. And I think that
you
it's
like
like,
those muscle men,
oh
man.
man, look, it's the crop top. It
Yeah,
keeps I can't get away from it. Um it really kind of speaks to, I think, the because I personally think this book is really well designed. I think, like, number one, we all see how the army has changed, and we all think it's a good thing. And yes, that is because we play a ton of games. Yes, we generally do fairly well at tournaments. Obviously, Brian, literally the best world leader player in the world, and me and Jamie, like, pretty decent at the game, or at least are long-term veterans. So we know, like, what these changes mean, and we know that Advance and Charge, while it did feel good for a lot of people, was not good for the game and was not good
yeah.
for player skill. It was like a bit of a crutch. And I know it's kind of
As was
like,
Angron.
yeah,
As was
Angron was
Angron.
a crutch too. And not saying that Angron is like a write off now. He might not be. Look, we got to see how that one
Need
plays out.
time.
And I get it. If people are like, I just finished painting Angron, he's trash on the tabletop now. Yeah, that does suck. I'm not trying to like devalue your opinion. Like, you're absolutely entitled to say I do not enjoy this codex. And not everyone is going to enjoy that playstyle. Some people genuinely do love the adrenaline rush of like, yes, I'm running 90 miles an hour across the board. Totally fair. I'm not saying you're wrong for that. I'm just saying for the people who read this and immediately think my favorite army has been nerfed into the ground, that's not quite correct.
No.
And we have 6 detachments, as Jamie says. They're all completely different from each other. They offer a completely different variety of playstyles and army builds that are like, no army is going to look the same between detachments. The ones that are maybe going to be the most similar are vessels and the 8 band one, the name escapes me, possessed
Is
warband or
this
whatever.
waterbound
Lot
bag?
something, yeah, something silly.
Yeah.
Those might look a little bit similar, but broadly speaking, the detachments will be completely different from each other. And that's really interesting because, like, let's face it, even in our Patreon discussion over the last maybe 3, 4, 6 months, it's a little bit dry sometimes when we're
Yeah.
trying to have this competitive discussion and it inevitably funnels down into, yes, the Orbi 2K is the best, or yes, the Brosy 2K is the best. And not that there's anything wrong with that. It's really cool that, like, from the Patreon Discord, we've had these two archetypes be built, which are incredibly powerful. That's great and amazing. But now we're going to have a ton of new ways to play the game. There's going to be variety, versatility, and most importantly, and I think this is the point that me and Jamie really want to hammer home, and it's something that we've driven into people's minds since the Red Path is like begun, basically, is player style and individual player styles are, they have room to breathe in this codex. You're not being funneled into a specific playstyle. Number one, the army isn't being warped around the power of Angron, which is incredible. Like,
Yeah.
it was so warped around them in the index. Number two, it's not warped around their speed. This army is well balanced and well rounded and gives you the opportunity to play the game the way you want to. Like, we all loved Josie's Jackpack story from the index, but the index did not want you to play Jackpack.
Right.
She was
Yeah.
able to play it because she was incredibly talented. The index did not want you to play non-Gron. I was able to do perfectly average with that, which is
No,
fine.
you did better than that. You did better than that.
Sure. It was, but what I'm saying is, like, you were fighting against the rules that you were presented
Yes.
with, right?
Yeah.
Until Vessels came around, at least.
Yeah.
You look at the Codex now, and say you're someone like me, right, who just does love non-Gron playstyles, who loves the passive aggressive style. I'm immediately like, all right, amazing. I've just converted like 18 new 8 bands. Fantastic. I've got a way of playing them. You go to Josie, who's kind of like, yep, now I can run my jackpack as I want to. I can run this super wide list. And not only that, you've got amazing fire support now, which is
Yeah.
incredible. You know, we go to you, who's like the known lover of Lord of Skulls. Well, he's literally never been better, right? So you can pretty much ask like most World Eater players and say, hey, what is it that you want to play? What kind of play style do you want to play? And you can slot them into one of these attachments. And I think it's great for the vast majority of the community who want to express themselves in a way that isn't just, here's the list, play the list, do well. you know? Now you can put your individual stamp on things, which has been a really important part of the Red Path, I think, is like getting people to realize that you don't have to meta list. You don't have to follow exactly the best thing all the time. Yes, you can do that, and yes, there's nothing wrong with that, but feel free to express yourself through the list building that's presented here, through the incredible rules, because I don't really think that there's like a massive power differential between any of these detachments. And we're going to be putting out an infamous tier list on the detachments pretty soon. But I think they're quite close together, you know? And
Yeah.
in my opinion, it's
There's
probably,
not a bad one.
there
There's
isn't a
not.
bad one. Yeah,
No.
absolutely. And I think that's one of the best parts about this new release is the fact that it allows for player expression. Yes, I love the rules and I love the playstyle change, but I love most of all that it allows that individual expression of how you want to play the game. You being literally anyone, you know?
It just like so yesterday, like when we kind of were first, was it yes? I can't remember if it was in the video or like pre-talk or after talk when we was all chatting. Maybe it's just a Discord chat. But like when we first kind of like start looking at the rules, at the detachment, sorry, you get your first feelings of, oh man, this is amazing. This isn't for me. And I don't, maybe it was me, was kind of like maybe a bit down on the demons detachment, right?
Until.
Until, yes, just was it, I think you brought up the fact how the bloodletters work,
I
the
think Brian
spawning
floated
bloodlet.
the idea and then
Yeah.
you and me went off
And
on a
yeah, and
bender.
then suddenly this thing which is like, it's not really for me, like, oh my God, I could like this is kind of like my wet dream of just really just like just pissing off the opponent.
Like
Like,
this tactic might not be good, but it's just so funny and so janky that I'm going to do it
yeah,
anyway.
yeah. And it's like I look up at my shelves I'm right now and I've got 30 bloodletters just sitting there.
Yeah.
I haven't seen the time of day in forever. It's like, I'm going to play this. Like I'm
Hmm.
gonna. I don't think it will be my main one, my main detachment, but I'm definitely gonna like mess around with it on TTS and things like that. Because yeah, like you mentioned, the Gortrak onslaught, Gortrak slaughter murder
The
party bus.
driving one.
Yeah, beat beat boot boot. That is certainly where I'm starting off. Because it does personal play style. There's when we still haven't told Brian my bullshit stupid list yet, have we?
No, I don't think so. I think it's maybe better we keep that one until we
Yeah,
drop it live.
yeah. So but yeah, so like Dara and I were talking and just came up with like an absolute nonsense, but kind of weirdly, possibly okay
Hmm.
Gortrak army list that just like you're not getting no one's run this list ever. It's like it's one of those things which is just genuinely new in the universe. No one has ever had that thought before until I did, and it feels really nice. I don't think it will be that good, but I just want to see my opponents like across like, what the fuck do I do against this? This isn't how World Eater is supposed to work. Like just we're going to start experiencing all these brand new emotions. Like
The
it's just
emotion of spawning 10 bloodletters when the last guy in a squad dies to a hazardous check is one of those emotions, and I'm ready for it. Well, I mean, I think like on a purely kind of like uh internal view, which I think is quite interesting, and maybe you probably would say the same for me. I haven't seen you this excited about World
no,
Eaters in maybe since the ninth edition Codex
yeah.
released, and even then, I don't
Um,
know if you were this hype. And I'm kind of in the same boat, to be honest. I think this is an incredible book, and it's super fun.
I think it's been a combination not just of World Eaters, but as the game, as I mentioned earlier, 10th edition is incredibly balanced for Warhammer 40k. It's been incredibly balanced and fixed, but it did lose a lot of its unique identity and personal input
The
where
freak.
ninth edition we were like making fucking red butcher squads like with the rune, and like everything was so personal,
Mm.
like and very good. 10th edition took a lot of that away, which did change the game, but 10th edition is massive. Like I don't know what the player influx has been. GW's doing fine. They're making money hand over fist, so they're doing something right. Um, but it did for myself. I don't want to say reduce the fun of the game. I just lost the
I
spark.
think
I
it lost the
lost the
personal touch a little bit.
yes.
Yeah.
It was like it. I'm trying to think of a good kind of good metaphor for it, but nothing I want to say in public, quite honestly. But basically, it's.
It's like when your favorite burger joint gets bought out by McDonald's, you
Yeah, there
know?
you go. That's much better than what I was trying to think of. Yeah, it's like maybe it's still got the same name, and it's still got the same like fundamental ingredients, but the sort of like old guy at the back of who would make the burgers for you, like he got fired for health and safety reasons. It's like, well, I needed that little bit of extra bacteria because that's what was giving it the flavor, which is what I loved, or right. Um, but this is simulating that. It's giving us that excitement, that the just the bonkers. Oh my god, I've got to write 5 lists today, and maybe I'll just call off sick to work to do it or something.
Hmm.
Like I'm excited. I'm just we're back, baby. We're back. That's how I'll put it.
100%. Yeah. I think it's oh, my Alexa's just popped off. Weird. Yeah, it's just like super exciting. Like it's it's going back to the roots, like the eighth, ninth edition roots, which I love, which is obviously brand new for a lot of people. And I hope that as they experience it, that they kind of also end up loving it too.
Mm,
Um, and again, to reiterate, I understand the frustration.
yeah.
We absolutely are not trying to demean anyone who feels frustrated. We're not trying to say like, "Oh, you're wrong for that." What we're trying to do is put this new book in the context of the wider game, but also to sort of present the views of people who have been playing World Leaders for a long time. For many people, this is their first significant rule shift for World Leaders, whereas this is like our, I don't know, sixth, seventh, eighth.
Yeah,
It,
who
it's been
knows?
a lot between like 8th edition Psychic Awakening, ninth, 9.2, 9.3, blah, blah, blah,
Yeah.
whatever. This, for me, is probably the most fun change of rules that we've had so far. Psychic Awakening was a big contender as like, oh wow, this is amazing. Getting things like Red Butchers and Gorefather, or Gorefather.
Your father, yeah.
Um, but this is like, I feel like they've really captured the identity of at least my vision of what World Leaders is, and I think yours
Yeah.
as well, and put it together in a way which feels fair for both players, which allows really high room for skill expression and a very enjoyable experience at the table. But I will say, I think the skill floor for World Leaders has come up a significant
Yes.
amount. The army was already kind of challenging to get into in terms of learning the ways to make it good. I think that might have gotten a little bit harder. So if you're like a brand new player getting into World Leaders, yeah, it's a bit of a challenge. It's not like an insurmountable one, and you won't feel the urge to just like bull your army across the board and see what happens, which is a good thing.
Yeah.
Um, but we will have videos coming out of like new how to start competing with world leaders,
Yeah.
which should ease people into it. But the skill floor has come up, but the skill ceiling has shot up. Like
Yes.
the jump in the skill ceiling is significant. If you are the kind of person who just loves the army and wants to master it and wants to find out all the tricks, the amount of tricks in this book, we've had it for such a short amount of time, and already we've had several moments on Discord or on Zoom calls where we're just like, oh my god, you can do this thing, and just like word vomiting the possibilities of just yeah, and then you can blah 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 blah, and like this domino effect happening where it's like you could never do this before.
Right.
You were really what you see is what you get. I run at you, I blend you. Maybe I've got a couple of tricks. Now it's just a completely different kettle of fish.
I think one of the biggest advantages of, and again, we are so new into digesting this, and we're nowhere near to solving anything here. But on face value, there's new things for us, but there's no fundamentally new mechanics that we haven't seen another army have, or we remember it from last edition or whatever. So all of these
Spawning
things I think
Bloodletters, arguably
is probably about
pretty
as
new.
yeah, and let's be honest, it's probably going to get changed.
That there's no way that stays the same.
Yeah, but my my point here is this stuff all feels like over time balance seasons, right? With our 3 month seasons, we can balance this with points. None of the rules. There's some weaker units which, but may shake out in the wash. We need time and experience with these. Nothing is fundamentally bad to the point of how a couple of units were basically close to untakeable previous to the index. Okay, a couple of units that you never took in the
Say
index.
the Helldrake, Jamie. Just say his name.
Oh, I was. I honestly actually forgot about the Helldrake. That's how fucking bad that is. So okay, the Helldrake. Predators. I don't know. I think there may be a play in them. Besides the point, the rest of everything, the stuff we are typically playing with, I think will just be easily fixed with points adjustments, which is good. Because that's a metric that can rewriting rules and changing rules has so many effects for other armies. Excuse me, but points I think is putting us in a position where we can be fixed with points is great. Angron can be pointed correctly to be playable.
100%. Yeah, 100%.
But yeah, that's really. I think we've probably just about summed up everything we need to talk about, right?
Yeah, I think so. I think core takeaway message here, if you are feeling hard done by with the Codex, give it some time. Maybe try and take away some of the messages that we said here. Like, look, if you've gotten this far in the video, you're listening to two people who've been playing World Eaters for long enough to not be surprised by this and to know that this is a good thing. And feel free to disagree with us. Feel free to say that we're stupid and wrong. That's completely fine. Let us know down below. But if you want to take it from people who have the experience, this is a good change. It'll take some time to get used to, but it will make us all better combat players at the end of the day. And whatever way you want to play World Eaters, you probably have a detachment that suits the way that you want to play now. And I just think, creatively speaking, super exciting. I absolutely need to get as many games as possible in with this book as quickly as possible. I am so excited, and I can't wait to see. Like, I'm just super excited to kind of like talk to people in Discord or online and just say like, what's your experience? How do you feel about this? Have you played some games? How are those games? And I just can't wait to have fresh and new conversations and see what people discover. I just think it's incredibly exciting.
Yeah, yeah, I think completely agree. It's exciting times. So much to talk about. We've got a lot of content we're going to be putting out on this. But yeah, basically to wrap it up, if you've made it to this point in the video, very much appreciate it. Please make sure to join our Discord. That's where all of our our community is based and centered around. Whether you're here for the hobby, whether you're here for the competitive side, just learning the game, you're just kind of curious about World Eaters, whatever, come join our Discord. Link will be below. We've got the Instagram and everything else going on. And if you are looking for sort of like more advanced, higher level sort of like advice and guidance competitively, we've got Patreon. And again, if you want that kind of, you want to up your hobby game, we've got Patreon support for that as well, where Dara will will walk you through some things. I avoid that. In fact, I don't think I've read that channel since it was created. It's the one that just remains in white in Discord for
It's
me.
great. I can say what I want to about
Yeah,
you in there,
but
and nothing
there's
ever happens to me.
yeah, I don't know what kind of information he's released about me or said about me.
It's just
Uh,
a pseudo Trench Crusade channel with the Patreon hobby content reader along the top.
Whatever, man. But yeah, we'd love your support, but it's absolutely not necessary. You can support us on YouTube. You just liking the video, leaving a comment for the video. That gets us,
Just let us know what you think. Maybe you
yeah,
completely disagree with what we've said, and that's
yeah,
totally fine. We want to have that chat. We're not here
yeah,
to kind of dictate our opinions and say that
exactly.
it's the rule of law, right?
Yeah. But yeah, on that point, Dara, why don't you take us out of here, man?
Alrighty, man. It's the brand new Codex. It's a brand new dawn. Great day to be killing, maiming, and burning. So until the next one, everyone, stay healthy, stay safe, and make sure that you kill, maim, and burn.